This past March, just last month, Amy and I were able to go to see Larry and Jane Parks. They've been in missions for many, many years. Trying to remember the exact year that they went. I thought they said it was 1978. I think that's right. It's been many, many years. I thought I wrote some notes here. There we go. We've supported them since almost the beginning. Of course, Larry is from Blue Earth area and kind of eventually ended up here, and so has ties. It's Ron, Larry, and Jane are probably the only missionaries supported by First Baptist Church and Faith. I don't know. I don't think it was a carryover. It just so happened that they had the ties, and so we've supported Larry and Jane for a long time. They're always so faithful to write letters. Their prayer letters. They're always so faithful to visit when they're in the area. In fact, they sort of, not officially, but they sort of look at our church as sort of their home church when they're back in the area. They have some family in the area. Their kids live on the East Coast, and so there's not a lot that brings them here except family and churches like ours. And so they were really, really grateful to see Amy and I. As I said, they moved to Spain around 1978, just a few years after Franco had died. And we talked quite a bit about Franco and the way life was around this fascist dictator, and then just how things had to slowly change afterward. Even people talking about their faith in an open way. They could not do that before. Franco was very Catholic and really promoted the Catholic Church and really would get the names of people from the Catholic priests about who was meeting or who was spreading the gospel. And so missions were just really not available at all under Franco. And when he died, the walls did not come readily down. There was still quite a bit of a hold on what was going on there, especially with the Roman Catholic Church. So they started. This apartment here is actually where they started. They drove us by and they said that's where we started our first church, and where they said it was very loud, people from the outside, and they had to be very careful about neighbors and times that they were meeting and things like that. But that's where the whole thing started when they first came. So let me give you a little idea of where it is, thanks to technology. There's Spain, and then there's Madrid, and we get to Toledo, right there. Now, Jane called it Toledo, and Larry called it Toledo, and so it's the same. But there was a view that we could take. We drove to this vista that Franco had kind of set up as a hotel, and then you could see kind of the whole city from there. And so it's a beautiful city. It's actually a UNESCO World Heritage Site, the old city is. So it's something that they're even preserving, and they're not going to allow it to have huge skyscrapers in the city. And so it's something that they're trying to preserve, and I'll show you a few pictures from it. Right in the middle of it, you can see that big building right there. You're like, what is that? Well, I'll show you what it is. There it is. It's the cathedral. It's the seat of the cardinal. This building was built between 1226 and 1493. It is 390 feet by 194 feet, and it's 146 feet tall. So just a very, very massive thing. We did not go into it. You had to pay to go in and take pictures and everything, and we just did not feel like that would be worth it. Maybe some of the paintings and sculptures and things like that would have been nice to see, but I think by that point we were just kind of like, yeah, we're good. We don't need to see the inside of a cathedral. But it was a lot of people flocked to Toledo to see this cathedral. This is the castle. The other building that's sticking up right there is the Alcazar. And I found the word Alcazar actually is like an Arabic. Am I saying all the stuff that you were going to say? Oh. Okay. Nope. Let me give you a tour of their home. All right. Oh, a narrator even. That's great. So glad for that. Gate, compound. Here is their house. Chamber where they keep people that come to stay with them. Open the door, there's a little apartment down there. Did you have this too? There's their car. They've got quite a nice compound. They have fellowships and youth things here, soccer nets, a basketball hoop. Here's their house again. They put in a little ramp. Up to their door. So, yeah, it's really quite beautiful. Most places, especially in that neighborhood, had gates on the doors. There's a lot of theft and things like that, and so they did. So that one area that looked like a garage, I think it used to be a garage, and they've turned it into living quarters. They have people stay with them quite a bit. This was Evelyn's home. She can talk about that for a little while. This is their front door. They had just a beautiful home. It wasn't overly ornate, but it was just really a lot of different memorabilia from over the years, a lot of Spain things in their home. So we got in on, Thursday, and then I think it was that Friday, it was Saturday, we went out and were handing out tracts. And we found a busy intersection, and then we started to hand out some of the. Now it's hard for me to pass out tracts in English. It's hard in Spanish because I don't know how to say "here, take this" or in some polite way. I learned a few phrases, but normally I just smile. And it was funny. I would say "para ti" or whatever the word for. I knew it at the time. I don't anymore. But this is a gift. You could say that. This is a gift. And most people just recognize right away I was an American. Thank you. You just can't hide it. But they would take it. And I found that a lot of people would take it. Maybe like 60 or better % would take it. And I thought, this is really, really terrific. There was one guy that took it, and I had it in my pocket, and I meant to transfer it over to my suit coat, and I didn't. But he started looking at it when he realized what it was, ripped it up, and threw it right in the trash can. So I went and got it. But I found out later, all the people that were taking it and were so, oh, yeah, thank you, gracias, gracias, gracias. You go around the corner, look in the trash can, and it was full. So you can see it there. A lot of the tracks. So people were like, Spain nice, maybe polite. Sure, I'll take it. But then they weren't really interested. But there was Larry. He was out there too, passing out tracts, and this was not actually run necessarily by their church, but there was a couple in the church that just kind of took it on them to go and give out say anybody who wants to can come, and we're going to give out tracts. And they had tracts in all different kinds of Bible or languages. So they gave me some German ones, and I had some English ones, and so they would go and pass out tracts. This was near a bus station, so a lot of people coming and going. Larry and Jane started the church some years ago, and then it was turned over to a pastor, and then for whatever reason there was trouble in the church, and I don't remember all the details, if the pastor didn't want to be there, if he did something wrong, or if the church didn't like him or what, but so then Larry and Jane would come back, and they'd get it established and work it all out. Then they'd turn it over to a pastor, and then something would go wrong, and they'd have to come back. And finally, they said, "We're retiring. You need to find a good man." And they found a really good man, Pastor David. That's him right there. We went to a marriage seminar. Didn't really help us, our marriage, because it was all in Spanish. Spanish. So, but he had some good notes, and I could kind of follow what the Bible verse was, and I'd look it up in my Bible. It's Corinthians is not very hard to mask in Spanish. So, anyway, but he's a good man. He very educated, cared about the people, and he's going to be just a great fit for the church. You can already tell that the people. He's only been there since November, and the people really like him. I'm sure Evelyn can talk more about him. But this is the church. They haven't always been in this building, but this is the one that they're in now. And I do have, of course, a little tour. You can kind of see where it is in relation to the city. See, there's the stained glass. I'll show you what it looks like from the inside. But just on the first floor of a building. They don't really have a parking lot. You kind of have to just park wherever and make your way in or use public transportation or something. I did get permission from Pastor to take video. He said it was fine. That was it. So yeah, it doesn't seat a whole lot of people, but it was full on Sunday morning. It was really wonderful. I'll show you some pictures. It fills up pretty nicely. Whenever you came in, Evelyn can tell you, I think, about what going into the church was like, how wonderful it was to see everybody and how they greeted people. Very biblically, let's say very biblically. So some of the songs that we sang, we knew. And some of the songs we didn't know very well at all. Do you know this one? Even the timing was a little off. Evelyn can tell you what that song was, but we're in the pew. Larry and Jane, they're not up front. They're not elders. They're not running the church at all. It's all run by other people, and they're just now attending. They had a little overflow area as well for people, and people from all over, people that were still trying to get on their feet spiritually, some refugees that were coming to try to get some help. Just a good mix of young and old, mature and trying to mature, and a good church. Evelyn, again, can tell you more about that. And then it was just great to see Larry and Jane after church talking with people. They just have really invested in people and built up relationships. They spent a lot of time just getting to know the people of the church, and you could just really tell there was mutual love there, that they really loved Larry and Jane, and that Larry and Jane obviously really loved the church. They started a seminary several years ago, and again, I don't have all the dates for this, but they wanted to start a seminary to be able to train national pastors to be able to pastor. And maybe it was because Larry was so sick of going out to find a pastor who could pastor this church, only to find that maybe they weren't going to pan out very well. But Larry and Jane started this seminary, and if I'm not mistaken, I think it was actually kind of the campus of another seminary that had been started. But they had this on the wall there, Seminario Biblico Bautista. So they're trying to train people up for the ministry. So much of the missionary's life is doing normal everyday things. The times we've been on mission trips, all the stuff that you do, they have to do it as well. They have to go shopping. They have to buy the things they need. And we have such a mentality in America of efficiency, and we're going to get it, how can we do this the easiest way we can? And there's such an abundance that it's a very easy thing for you to go shopping. Not a very easy thing over there. and there's some stuff you have to get used to. I was not used to seeing just fish out there in what was kind of like a Walmart. It was a big store like a Walmart, and they didn't just have that. They had all kinds of stuff there. This is just ham that's just hanging there. It's been cured, salted, or whatever, and it was just hanging there. In fact, the Parkses had one in their basement. It was just in a box, and I'm not used to that sort of thing. I thought I had some pictures of, where's the, oh yeah. There's the octopus. Sitting on ice there in the grocery store. And there's, of course, Larry. Larry loved go shopping. But he was also kind of always looking for opportunities to talk to people as well. So we did not stay with Larry all the time. We were much faster than he was. Larry would go very slowly. But again, looking for opportunities. And so there was also an open air market that we went to. Spain, or Toledo, I think, especially is known for steel and leather. And so there were some great things to go see there. This is kind of an area that it's kind of like the farmer's market here, where they just have an open area, and then once a week or whatever, they set up shop and everybody brings their things in. We did do some sightseeing. This is a place called Segovia, where a castle of Ferdinand and Isabella was. So we got to go in and tour this. I'll show you some pictures from that. This was actually one of the templates that eventually became Disney's Cinderella Castle there in Disney World. And they also used that as a template for the castle in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Larry didn't tell us. Well, Larry did say, he mentioned something like that, but Wikipedia was immensely helpful for this sort of thing, okay? But maybe you can't see the exact, but that's just, it was a beautiful, beautiful building outside and on the inside. Just a really amazing thing to walk through it and to see all the ornate paintings and things like that. This is from the very top of the castle, you could see the cathedral. This is the Cathedral of Our Lady, the Assumption, and of Saint Fructus. That's what that cathedral is, and again, just everywhere. Huge Catholic churches. And you think about, and again, this is something you don't really think about, but you're over in another country and they say, what are the Catholic churches like in your city? And you would say, just like every other church. Yeah, Calvary Lutheran probably has a nicer building than the Catholic Church does in town. But over in Spain, especially, the buildings are just very beautiful and ornate. This was the inside of the castle. This castle was built before the 12th century. They're not sure exactly when it was born, but there's mention of it before the 12th century. So it's been around a long, long, long time. We also, in Segovia, saw the Roman aqueducts. It was built in the 1st century, and it worked and was functioning until 1973. It had 167 arches and brings water from 11 miles away. Here's another picture of it. We get to kind of go right up to it, and it was a pretty neat thing to see. It's actually the wallpaper on my computer now. Then we also got to see the Royal Palace of La Granja de San Ildefonso. Thank you. Yeah, it was an 18th century summer palace made by the kings of Spain. They would spend their summers there. Built again in the 18th century. Beautiful place. It's not really running, but it wasn't anything to go in. And the tourists, you could look around, and they had beautiful gardens that were still being kept up. And we didn't get to go inside, but it was pretty neat to see from the outside. So again, the Parks, they said they are retired now, and it was either they could come back to the United States and live here, or they could stay there in Spain. The reason they chose to stay in Spain, a few reasons. One is that because they've been paying into the national health care, they have their needs met, and the health care, I guess, is pretty good. Any kind of socialized health care is going to have trouble, but we have trouble with our health care system here in the U.S. as well, and so they thought, well, it's going to be good for us just to stay here. Two is that they have children that are somewhat nearby. They have a daughter named Sarah, and Evelyn will talk about her. She lives in Barcelona. And then they have a son named Josh, who lives maybe half an hour away. They see each other quite often, and they have an established home. They have an established church. They have just the way that they're doing life, and it just made all the sense in the world for them, if they're going to retire there. Now, again, they're called to retire because their mission board said, that's it. The mission board sent us a letter saying, consider reducing their support if you'd like, but they are retired. You don't have to send them anything anymore. But they are still involved in the work of the Lord. They're still involved in some way. The seminary, Jane's not running it anymore. I think I showed you that picture of that man that's running it. But they're still just involved in the work of the ministry in the church. And so we're grateful that we've been able to support them all these many years. Again, it was great to see them just interacting with people in the church and talking about their stories of how they came to know the Lord. And all of that was fruit to your account. Again, Evelyn can talk more about the individual stories. But God has been so faithful to them, and I can't imagine how happy they are to see a thriving church there. This was a Wednesday night service. Look at the piano player. There's Larry sitting next to this young guy here. So just involvement in the church. The pastor that Sunday morning just said, make sure you tell your church, thank you for all the years of support. Thank you for your prayers. Thank you for everything that you've done for the Parkses and for our church. And so I'm to convey that as well. Many marriages have been strengthened, many people saved, many people straightened out, and a lot of people helped by the many years of this church and the Parks ministry there in Spain. They have started other churches around the area, but this is kind of the one that is kind of the mother church and where they are now. So thank you, church, for sending us to go see Larry and Jane and to be with them, to see their ministry and to learn a little bit more about the mission field, the highs and some of the lows. And it was really encouraging for Amy and I just to hear their stories, to have supper with them and hear of ministry, philosophies, and it was really great. Amy, I don't know if you have anything to add to anything I've said.
I think I would just say that they were a great example of just relational people, right? Like they did not see ministry as like a to-do list, these are the things that have to get done this week, today, whatever. They were always about the people that they were around, stopping and taking the time and making the conversations. And it was why it was so encouraging to hear their stories of her. They had their lives threatened at different points. They would Jane started to have a Bible study with a Muslim woman whose husband had left her because she wasn't a good Muslim in his eyes or whatever. And so she started meeting with her, doing Bible study, and pretty soon the husband came back and she went up to the door of the Bible study and this little boy answered the door and said, my dad said if you come in here, he's going to kill you. And Jane said to him, well, you know what? That doesn't bother me at all because if something happens to me, I'm going straight to heaven to be with Jesus. Can you say that? And she said, and so she started having Bible study in the park then, and then that turned into having these ladies over in her home for a meal, and then asking her, like, what does God think about women? Because, like, Jane had served them at a table with men, and they'd all eaten together, and in Islam, they have to eat separate from their husbands. They eat at the end of the meal, whatever's left, and I just felt like they were just really fearless. Like they're really convinced that, whatever God is going to do, he's going to do, and they're just willing. And so that was really encouraging. It was really encouraging. And also just their view of Catholicism in the country and how that affects their ability to share the gospel. And yeah, that's
Yeah, good, good. All right. And now Evelyn. With this water.
It'll kick in. So I didn't take a ton of pictures because I'm really, really terrible about pictures. So I don't have all that many, and this doesn't seem to want to work for me anyways. Mostly what I have are bullet points to help me remember what I wanted to say, because as soon as I get up here, I'm like forgetting all of it at once. I don't know, this does not seem to want to work. Well, he figures that out. So I left for Spain at the end of January and came back at the end of March. So I was gone 2 months, and I already want to go back. While I was there, I spent some time in Alcalá de Henares and some time in Madrid and a little bit of time in Barcelona. How they would say Barcelona because everything has a lisp over there. So if you want to be authentic, pronounce it Barcelona. I've already gotten heckled for that one. So I was staying with the Parkses. I had that whole bottom apartment to myself. It had a couple bedrooms and then a little kitchen and a bathroom and then a utility closet and just, I don't know, it was really nice to have my own space while I was there. I definitely realized how much I miss living with people while I was there, because I would have 2 meals by myself in the basement, and then the midday meal, I would go upstairs and have lunch with them. The midday meal is really a big deal in Spain. That's when,
There we go.
oh, let's see, you know what? This will be for my benefit, so I can remember what I wanted to say. So the big meal of the day would be the midday meal. That's when everybody comes home from work and all the kids come home from school and everybody gets together as a family and has their meal together. And breakfast and supper, I mostly had toast and coffee, and it was awesome. So lunch was when I got to sit with the Parkses and hear their stories. And a lot of the time we'd have company over. And it was really a blessing to be able to eat with them every day. So that was kind of my schedule. So Sundays we had church. Mondays, dear, what did we do Mondays? I should have written more of this down. I think Mondays we had discipleship. So several mornings out of the week, Mrs. Parks would have me upstairs, and we would sit for 2 or 3 hours at a time. And she would just tell me stories, give me lessons that she learned on the mission field. And we worked through a discipleship course together. That was a huge blessing to me. It really stretched my perspective on missions and on Christianity, on Catholicism especially. That was something I learned a whole lot about, because Spain is like the center, the heart of Catholicism, or one of the heartlands of Catholicism, especially in Europe. So I learned a lot from her. Wednesdays and Thursdays were piano and English lessons, where I had one person who would come to the house and take piano lessons from me, and the others we would meet at the church and do piano and English together. And that was a great opportunity to just learn more about people, to interact more with them. The English lessons were held more with adults, and a lot of them who were very young Christians. So that was really an interesting opportunity. And then the piano lessons were held with more my peers. And the way things are done in Spain, young people are considered anybody from the ages of 15 to 30. So like in the youth group, everybody was probably a decade older than me, but we got along great. So most of my students, we were learning piano together. They were about 10 years older than me, but we got along really, really well. They were actually the biggest blessing of my whole trip. So I was going to show you pictures of Toledo, but they're not showing up. So I should have just let Dad show you all of his pictures. That's okay. So he already showed you the cathedral. That's okay. the big square building, that would be the Alcázar, that was built in the 3rd century. So Toledo was originally settled by Jews after the diaspora in, like, I forget what it was, very, very shortly after Christ's death. So it was originally a Jewish settlement and then was overtaken by the Romans. So the big square building was built, I think, by the Romans in the 3rd century, and I should have written this down, but it was razed and then built again sometime later, and then during Franco's time, it went through another rougher time. It was, I think, demolished and had to be rebuilt again in large part. So the structure itself is newish, but there has always been a castle in that spot for like the last 2,000 years, which is so cool. Toledo is, what's the word? A peninsula? Is that the word I'm looking for? No. I mean that Toledo has a river looping all around it, so there's water on 3 sides of Toledo. Yes. And the castle sits right at the corner of the loop. So the Tagus River loops around all of Toledo on 3 sides. And the 4th side is towards the north, I believe, towards Madrid. So it's very well fortified. The inner city has a wall all the way around it. And what is not a wall is a cliff falling into the river. So really well fortified, really, really cool city. I just loved getting to explore it. There was, that is, I guess I would show you the pictures, but I don't have the pictures now. So you'll have to imagine it. It was pretty cool. And I guess I'm just going to move right on to talking about my time in Spain. So Catholicism was a really, really big deal there. I guess, so 70% of Spanish people profess to be Catholics, but only about, I think, a third of them actually practice Catholicism or are devout. And a growing number of people, I think, are professing atheism or agnosticism. It's just kind of in line with being westernized. When the Parks got to Spain, it was a third world country, and Catholicism was even more prevalent. But since then, it has become westernized and been kind of incorporated into the rest of Europe in a way. So it's switched to the euro from their original currency, and the rest of the culture has kind of followed that trend of being integrated just into the Western culture at large. So you see a lot more of like some of the political and social issues that we deal with here in the States are becoming a bigger deal over there. And you see people's atheism and agnosticism rise along with that cultural shift. So the younger people, I think the younger generation especially, tended away from Catholicism, but not towards Christianity, just towards a belief in nothing at all. So that was, I think Catholicism is more of a big deal with the older generation. I had the opportunity to sit down with a number of Catholics while I was in Alcalá de Henares, and the one who really sticks out in my mind was an older gentleman who is a staunch Catholic, and not really a biblically staunch Catholic, where he had given way on a lot of the social issues of our time, and didn't really have a biblical stance, but just a very, very set in his ways, very committed to Catholicism, and that was just kind of the norm. The older generation was a lot more attached to Catholicism. So it was really interesting to learn about that. We were able to visit a number of cathedrals and other sites like that, where I learned a lot about the Catholic Church, because here we get a watered-down version of the Catholic Church. They really try and keep their presence to a minimum here because they know that America is a more Protestant nation, and we tend more towards Lutheranism or other branches of Protestantism. So they keep their presence kind of quieter here, but in Spain, man, you just see all the pagan roots of Catholicism, all the ways in which it's really, really deceptive. I was there during Carnival and Mardi Gras, and you see like all these people who are just living like wildly unholy lives in the name of Catholicism, especially around Mardi Gras. So that was really interesting to see. I don't think the Catholic Church is in reality what we think it is. Living here in the States, we see this kind of nice American version of the Catholic Church, and when you go back to like an area where it's still really strong, you see just this powerful presence in people's lives that really seeks to control and to inspire fear in them. And it's really much farther from true Christianity than I even initially realized it was. I was in one cathedral and they had tombs set into the floor of all these cardinals and these giant red floppy hats hanging from a cord above each of the graves. And it's said that when those hats fall, that means those cardinals have gotten out of purgatory. And some of those hats have hung there for I don't know how long. But sometimes there was one cardinal who had an enemy in the Catholic Church, and that man went and tied his hat up with the strongest cord he could find so that this cardinal would never seemingly get out of purgatory. Just really weird things that you don't really associate with Catholicism here in the States because we get the very watered down version. So all of that was really eye-opening. I guess those are my thoughts on Catholicism. I'm going to talk first about my ministry opportunities, and I have to say that they were a lot less than my learning opportunities. I went to Spain with the mindset of, I'm here to minister. I'm here to just be helpful all the time. And I think the Lord genuinely had just a very different plan for me. So I got there, and I realized partway into my time there that I was not there to contribute so much as I was to learn, and I learned a lot. I'm going to start with the opportunities that I had to minister, but I have even more to say about what I learned while I was there. So the first ministry opportunity I had, I already told you a little bit about. It was just piano and English lessons, and that was mostly to members of the church. But I had a lot of fun doing it. I was able to teach the piano lessons, with the exception of one, in Spanish, so that was a lot of fun. That was a lot of trial and error and really intimidating at first, but I feel like I learned a lot in that. English lessons were a little bit more back and forth. I got to know some of the people in the church a little bit better through that. Unfortunately, a couple of them dropped out partway through, so that was maybe less of a robust ministry than I could have hoped for, but that's okay. I learned a lot doing it, and I had a lot of fun, especially getting to know the young people. There's this one young woman in their church named Oriana, and she wanted to learn how to play the piano for church. And she had been teaching herself online and really had a good ear for it, but she needed help spreading out her abilities, learning how to add some variety to her playing. So she and I had a great time just figuring out, like, how can we help you play better for church? How can we equip you to play offertories or to fill in when Juanjo is away? Juanjo's the pianist in that church, another young guy. And that was just a lot of fun. I'll talk more about the young people later, but they were just the highlight of my trip, just the best people. Another opportunity I had was outreach. It's what my dad already showed you pictures of. The lady and the gentleman who mostly headed that up, her name was Flor, and his name was Domingo, or Flower and Sunday in English. And they were a lot of fun. She was from Romania and had a really rough background, came from an abusive marriage, and really just had a rough time. And she met Domingo. I can't remember if they were saved before or after they were married, but they're just the sweetest people. And I think because they were both saved later in life, they realized the value of sharing the gospel. They really just have a passion for it. So they would go out every Saturday and stand on the street corners alone, just the two of them, and pass out tracts. They had it all mapped out exactly where they would go and when, so that they could reach as many people as possible. Florida was in an accident and had a bad foot, and they operated on it and operated wrong and had to reoperate, and she's in an incredible amount of pain. And Domingo, he was in an accident at work and injured his shoulder, and he hasn't been able to get that fixed. So the two of them are really sacrificing to be standing out there on the streets every single Saturday and passing out tracts, and I love their heart for God. I was able to talk to Flora a little bit, and the language barrier was definitely an issue. But she was just telling me about her family, and I think she's the only believer in her whole family. Neither of her children are saved. They're living in Germany, and they've heard their mom talk about Christianity, but they really don't believe it, and she just has such a heart to reach out to other people. And it's really an encouragement to me, because I am fully able-bodied, and I have extra time. I have free time all the time. And here are these two people who work full-time and have these incredible, painful injuries, and they're still out there every day they can be, passing out tracts and trying to witness to people and talk to people, and they're just an inspiration. I know that sounds cheesy, but they really are. They're just incredible people. So then I was able to take some time to go to Alcalá de Henares. It's a town northeast of Madrid, and I stayed there for a week with a Christian school teacher / missionary. She was sent, her name is Megan Kuhn, and she was sent with ABWE to be a Christian school teacher in this evangelical Christian academy they have in Alcalá. And she was sent as a missionary so that the ministry there is that they have all of these teachers who are sent by people in the States so that they can be teachers to missionary kids, so that both missionary parents can be free to just minister full time. And it was an incredible school. I was allowed to shadow Megan for a whole week, and it was just the best experience. I was able to visit, I think, 3 different churches while I was there. One was run by another missionary couple, the Hagues, up in Torres. They have a wonderful church. It was really a great experience to be with them. Just really incredible people. I was really blessed spending time with them. And then another church in Alcalá, which was run by a Spanish pastor named Miguel Angel Pozo, I think. And that was really cool to get to sit in on his service entirely in Spanish. And they had a really, really cool congregation. I got to help with Sunday school, also in Spanish. I kind of botched that one, but it was really fun to learn. So that was a great church. And then I visited one other, and I don't remember where it was or what the name was because it's been a minute and I didn't write it down. Those were my opportunities to visit churches in Alcalá. Otherwise, I was in the Evangelical Christian Academy for most of the week with Megan. And I was able to, I think for a couple days, I was spending mostly in the school. And I was able to shadow her and go from room to room and mostly just kind of watch what was happening. And it was really, really a cool school. I loved being there. So much, in fact, that I've decided to go to school for an education major, which is really an exciting move on God's part, because I always said I never wanted to be a teacher. And he really used this whole trip to kind of change my mind. So that is the direction I'm headed. I was there, I was able to... There was this couple, and I'm not remembering their last names now, but they ran a cafe called Bria Cafe in Alcalá, and they were missionaries, they were American missionaries, and they were really bothered by their lack of exposure to other people, because they're there to be missionaries, and they're not seeing people. They were, busy doing this project all day, and felt like they were never really seeing people and reaching out to people. So they started this cafe, and the ministry is that all of their... they take all their orders and serve all their coffee just using English. So people who are Spanish speaking and want to practice their English, and there are a lot of them, they go to this cafe and order their coffee in English and talk to the barista in English. And that may not sound like much of a ministry, but they also held this program. They would offer to customers, hey, you liked coming in and ordering your coffee in English and practicing your English? How about you come back and sign up for this class? And let's come after the cafe closes, and you can sit and talk with these people in English and practice your conversation. So it was like a 6-week course, and the first week they have 6 tables, and 1 Christian sitting at each table, and then 1 visitor who wants to learn English seated across from them, and a cup with little pieces of paper, random conversation topics on them. They'd have a theme for each night that they did this. So one week it would be sports, one week it would be, celebrities, another week it could be, food. And they'd just sit there and practice. You'd talk for 5-10 minutes and then switch tables. And so you'd get to talk to 6-7 different people in a night. And they'd use kind of, not overtly spiritual topics for the first 5 weeks or so. But then the 6th week, right before the course kind of ends and they take a break, they bring people in and ask them thoughts on religion and spirituality. And that's what they called it, so that they didn't scare people off right away. But the questions were how can we know God is real? Is Catholicism the only way? What do you believe about good and evil? And I was actually able to participate in that ministry while I was there. I got to sit down and talk to, I think It was something like 8 different people, and I got to give the gospel to almost every single one of them, because as they came through, I would ask them questions, and then eventually they would come to a point where they kind of look at me, and and I get a chance to tell them what I think about God, what I think about Catholicism, what I think about the truth of Jesus as our Savior. And that was just, like, hands down, the coolest experience ever. What an opportunity. I've never told 8 people in one day, here's the gospel. It was like the best thing ever. So that was one really, really cool, unconventional ministry that I got to take part in. And I would, if I go back to Spain, I'm moving, and I'm living in that cafe all the time for the coffee during the day, and then for the ministry at night. I loved it. So those were most of my ministry opportunities, and I'm sure there were some other smaller things that I'm forgetting, but those were most of the areas in which I was able to reach out. And then, as far as learning opportunities, well, there were so many more of those. First of all, those discipleship classes with Mrs. Parks, those were really encouraging. I was able to sit with her. Again, we'd sometimes talk for like 3 hours. And she just had a lot of wisdom and a lot of stories to share. So many stories about how different people in the church came to know God, how different missionaries and their bickering had led to church splits. They weren't all good stories, but they were good stories for me to hear, and I feel like I just learned so much through that. The main blessing to me were the jóvenes. The jóvenes means young people in Spanish, spelled with a J, but it's jóvenes. And it was a group of, I want to say somewhere around 20 young people, all between the ages of 15 and 30. There was one married couple in there, and then a couple of like dating or engaged couples in there. And the main blessing, there was this girl named Livia, and she's like 27, 28, but really didn't feel like she was 27 or 28. We got along really great, and she was able to take me around Toledo and show me the cathedral and take me to go get churros, and like we hit it off, and she was really a blessing. She took a lot of time to talk to me and to invest in me, just really, really sweet. And also she spoke English, which was really great. And then, there were a number of others. There was Betty. She is, I think, 26, and she is a graphic designer. And she has been out of a job for months, just can't find a job, can't find work. And she's living with her mom right now, which is actually pretty normal in Spanish society to just live with your parents well into your 20s. But she really was looking for a job, and I told her we would be praying for her. So if you think of it, pray for Betty, she needs a job. But in all this time that she had, where she's not working, she was just pouring herself into the church. She was running the seminary slides, and she was preparing lessons for the jóvenes meetings, and just like pouring herself into church wherever she could. She played guitar for church. She went and helped with outreach with Flor and Domingo, and she was really a blessing. And some of the lessons she was able to share in the jóvenes meetings, what I understood of them was really a blessing to me. And she was just incredible to get to know. And there were a lot of others. But the thing that I think encouraged me most about them was just the love that they clearly had for each other. I remember the first jóvenes meeting I went to, it was a Saturday night. It was like just a few days into my stay in Spain, and I was like really intimidated. I'm intimidated in English-speaking youth groups, and Spanish-speaking was like a whole other level of intimidating to me. And I walked in, and everybody seemed kind of down. And I sat down with them, and the pastor sat down and talked to them for a while, and everybody seemed really upset. And then the pastor walked away, and the group split up. There were some girls who stayed behind and some guys who left, and I was just wildly confused. And then people started crying, and I was even more confused. And I just kind of sat there and watched it all unfold for a while. They prayed together for a long time. And later I asked Betty, because she spoke very good English, I asked her what was going on, what everybody was so upset about. And she said that there was a young man in their youth group who had fallen away and become a homosexual and left their youth group, I think just like a week before I got there. And they were so torn up about this that they all met to cry and pray for him. And I thought it was the most incredible thing because it was so clear how much they loved each other and how much they loved Christ and their church, and they just wanted to pour into each other. And when one of them fell away, they all got together to just cry and pray. And that was like the most incredible blessing to me. And honestly, kind of thought-provoking. Like, how much do I care about my brothers and sisters? Do I sit down and cry and pray for them when they're falling away and when they're struggling? And that was really, really just a blessing to see. And if you want to pray for that young man, he still hasn't come back to Christ, but I know that the Jovenes in Spain are praying very hard for him. I think his name was Sebastian. If you want to pray for him, I know that they would all really, really appreciate that. So the Jovenes were, I think, my biggest blessing when I could understand them. And a lot of them did speak a little bit of English, so that was also a blessing. Other than that, I got to visit a lot of local churches. Why did I write local? It wasn't local. I got to visit a lot of churches. I went to Barcelona because the Parks' daughter, Sarah, lives in Barcelona, and they wanted to go visit her and their granddaughter, Abby. Now, Sarah went to school back in the States. She went to Bob Jones, and I think her hope in college, like most Christian girls, maybe not most, but a lot, she wanted to get married while she was there. And she got all the way through college without getting married. And then 8 years later was still single and still looking for, well, no, that's not true. She'd given up. She moved back to Spain and had just kind of resolved, all right, I'm going to be single and serve God here. And then she met her now husband, and they got married. And Sarah was so excited and wanted to have children and couldn't. For like another 10 years, she waited to be able to have a child. And now she has this little baby named Abby, and she's just like the sweetest. And they're just praising God that they were finally able to have a child, and they'd really like another one. So there's another thing you can pray for. They would like another child. But I was able to stay with them for a couple of days and visit their church and visit the youth group there. That was really a big blessing. I already told you about the 3 churches I visited near Madrid. And then I was able to visit the church of Josh Parks, their son. And that was in a small town called Mora, which means berry, for any of you who care. And Josh works full-time, and his wife, Adriana, works full-time. And they haven't been able to have children. They just work really, really hard and pour themselves into their jobs because they aren't missionaries. They're tent maker missionaries. They support themselves while also running this church. And I was there for one service. I think they had 10 people. And they had blankets on the backs of the chairs for if anybody got cold. And a little plastic keyboard set up on kind of a bench for the piano. And man, that was really convicting to see how hard they work to run that church, just the 2 of them, like pouring all this love and energy into the people. They have one saved man in the whole church. All the other men, I think there were 2 or 3 others who are coming, are unsaved, like the husbands of some of the saved women who go there. And I think they have 2 young people in the church. They're both sisters. And the 2 of them just pour their lives into these people, trying to keep this church going, trying to get a work started, working full-time. And it, again, was so convicting because here I am with all of my free time and this wonderful church building and all these wonderful people who are so excited to be here on Sunday. And there are Josh and Adriana overseas working day and night to just have this collection of 10 people in this little town with one-way street. Like, only the streets were so small, only one car could get through at a time. It was just a small town. And they were really, really a blessing and an inspiration and a testimony, really an example of what I want to be. I want to be someone who is ready to pour all of that love and effort into a work that maybe only has 10 people in it at the end of the day, and they were really incredible. So pray for them, because they could use it. That is about all I had to say about the learning opportunities. I did want to tell you a little bit more about the church. So the my dad already told you, the pastor is Pastor David, and he is married to Isa, and they have one daughter. And like he said, they've only been here since November, but it seems like they are doing just a tremendous job, really trying to get a lot of things going. The pastor attends the seminary still, so the seminary is something that Mrs. Parks set up, and Christian is the one who runs it. He worked full-time as a nurse and also runs the seminary on the side. And Christian and his wife, Paula, I think before they were saved, he's from Ecuador, she's from Peru. A lot of the people in Spain who I met, actually the majority of people I met in Spain were not Spanish. Most of them were Latin American. So Christian and Paula, they met in Italy, actually. And we're not Christians, and we're not living like Christians. And he, one day, decided to just take off to Spain without letting her know. And just took off. They were, I think, dating at the time. And Paula's mom called her up and said, "You can't let this one go. He's a good guy. You should chase him." So she went to Spain after him, and they both found themselves in Toledo. And I forget, I heard so many stories while I was there that I am forgetting. I'm a little hazy on all the details anymore, but the two of them ended up in church and got saved. And now he's the seminary director, and she is heading up all these women's ministries and participating and so good about reaching out to visitors. She was always the first person to come up to me and say, "Hello, hola," whatever I got there. And really, really a blessing. And the two of them have a couple of kids who I didn't meet, and then one 10-year-old daughter named Alba, who's just a sweetheart. She was one of my piano students, and they were a blessing to get to know. I think I've run through most of the main people in the church who I wanted to tell you guys about. The culture in Spain. So the first person I met in Spain was Yasmira, and she was a lady who was helping the Parkses clean their home. And I went into the house, and I met her, and I stuck out my hand and gave her a handshake. She kind of looked at me. And Mrs. Parks, I think she was a little bit too excited about this. She's like, "Oh no, that's not how you do it here." Apparently, when you say hello to someone in Spain, you kiss them. And that was really great. I really love that. So it's that was a little bit of culture shock. Another thing that's really different, at least for me, I don't know if this would be different for everybody, but you never take your shoes off inside. Wear your shoes everywhere, all over the house. And I think part of this is that they don't have carpet there. It's a lot of tiles because it's very hot there. But that was another really weird thing I had to get used to, walking around in shoes 24/7. That was, I think the kissing thing was the number one culture shock. But other than that, I don't know, they did a very long Spanish goodbye. Whenever you enter a room, you say hello, you make your rounds and say hello to everybody in it. And before you go, you make your rounds again and say goodbye to everybody. The culture was really, really warm, and I loved it there. Everybody was really welcoming and really kind, and I loved getting to know them. God's work in my life while I was there. I already said I chose a degree while I was there. That was really great because I had an idea of the direction I was supposed to go school-wise, but I did not have any idea what direction I was supposed to go degree-wise. And I had always insisted I would never, ever, ever be a teacher. And I think the Lord overhears the things I say and goes, "Oh, you don't want to do that? You should do that." So, I started talking to Sarah Parks when I was in Barcelona, and she was telling me just about the reasons that she'd started teaching. And she was telling me that it's not about loving education, and it's not about loving history and science and math. It's about loving kids and getting the opportunity to be in their lives. And after she said that, I started to really think, hey, maybe this is something that I've overlooked unfairly, that I should really start to think about for my life. Maybe this is a path I could take. And I was sort of undecided until I ended up at the Evangelical Christian Academy in Madrid a month later. Not quite a month, a couple weeks later. and just getting to sit in on all these classes and interact with all these awesome kids. And I am open to God redirecting me in the future, but for now, I know that that's where I'm supposed to start. So that's the plan. I just feel like I learned and grew so much while I was there. It really opened my eyes to the way that a lot of other believers live, and the way that a lot of our missionaries live, just really sacrificially working so hard to make God's work happen. And I'm really grateful to all of you for sending me. The church bought my plane tickets, and I know a lot of you came to my senior recital and were able to help me cover room and board while I was there. I even had a random couple in the cafe where I work hand me $100 and say, hey, this is for you when you go on your trip. And it was just incredible to see how God provided. I was able to leave behind a lot of money for the Parkses when I left, which was just an encouragement because that was all something I was able to do because of you. So thank you so much for sending me. And if anybody has questions, because I probably forgot something, feel free to ask. And if not, then I will get down from here as soon as possible. Jake.
So what was like the most unexpected lesson that you learned you didn't think you would learn during the
Oh dear.
during the
I don't know. I really was surprised by how much I learned about Catholicism, and I can't quite put my finger on what it was that really shocked me about it, but it was, I honestly, back in the States here, I've had this opinion of Catholicism that it's sort of like an off-brand of Lutheranism. Like it's just, I don't know, it's not all that different. Like they worship Mary, but other than that, we're pretty similar. And that's an overstatement. But I got to Spain and really realized, like, this is pagan. This is super pagan. This is nothing close to Christianity. It's the name of Jesus weaponized to control people and to lead them astray. And it's really interesting because even while I was there, I was reading my Bible and found verses about how, like, the word of God will be twisted and people will take advantage of it and use it to control and to lead astray. And that was really interesting. I have a very different view of Catholicism now than I did when I went. So I don't know if that's the most surprising thing, but that's the first thing that I could think of. So. Yeah. Food. This is probably like I don't know. A lot of people have asked about the food. It was not all that different. I think it probably depends on who you're staying with. I was staying with, I mean, obviously the Parkses, they're an American couple, so a lot of the things we ate were just food. I don't know. It wasn't all that different. A couple of things that stand out are churros and hot chocolate. They give you like a little cup of thick, it's like melted chocolate, and then they give you churros and you dip it, and that's awesome. And then another thing that they had was tortilla española. It's like an omelet, but this thick and full of potatoes and onions, and that was also awesome. Then the one other thing that I only tried once, and it was called paella, and normally it has like all these oyster shells in it, and shrimp with the heads and the eyeballs and everything still in it, and rice and stuff. And I ate the rice and avoided everything else. Mr. Laurel?
This ain't too hard. You know, I kind of relate to what you're saying about when you went in the Catholic Church. You know, and I know from my own experience for years I avoided going in them because I knew they were pagan. Right? When you went in for the first time, what was your reaction? What did you really see there for the first time?
I mostly noticed how pretty the stained glass is.
Yeah.
That's really shallow, but they have beautiful, beautiful churches, and it's clear like how much money and time they put into this. It's also interesting because a lot of those structures took hundreds of years to build, and you just wonder how many people died falling from the roofs, and how many people, like how much money and indulgences was used to build this great, beautiful place where people can go and worship a false god. It's really sad to see how much effort people put into serving something that's not God. Like they have these giant, elaborate gold, I forget what they call it. It's not a sculpture. It's like I don't know what it was. It was a very tall gold thing that came apart in a bunch of pieces, and they paraded through the streets. I'm really not remembering what this is called. And it's just this beautiful, ornate, super expensive thing, and it's really sad because a lot of those beautiful, ornate, expensive things were built during a time when people did not have money to just be able to give freely, and people were, they thought they were buying their way out of hell, and paying for just all these elaborate, lavish things that did nobody any good. It was really sad. Momo? Yes. One thing I noticed is, of course, Mary's always larger and more beautiful than anything in the room. She's always, it's interesting, she's not at the highest point of the cathedral. Like looking at the cathedral, you'll have Mary right here and Jesus above her. But she'll be bigger and better and prettier and just like glowing and beautiful. And Jesus always looked kind of sickly and just like small. I don't know. They did not glorify him. He was there to prove a point about Mary, it felt like. But yeah, statues everywhere. A lot of the apostles too. It wasn't just Mary and Jesus. It was apostles and saints. Thank you. Yeah. They have a king and a president at the same time. So the king, I think, is relatively well liked, if I remember correctly. His father was raised by Franco, the crazy dictator. And when Franco died, they offered him to become the dictator. They're like, hey, you should take control of Spain. And his father decided that he would really rather not, and turned Spain more into what it is today. So his father was really beloved because he was like the guy who gave up dictatorship. And I think the king right now is relatively well liked. I don't remember. I'm guessing the president is as socially liberal as one expects in a Western country anymore. I don't know. I don't remember hearing too much about him.
Most of the residents there, they've got bars on the windows.
That was
The parks have bars on the windows.
That was pretty common. The Parkses have had their house broken into a number of times. They have a problem with, I'm just forgetting words left and right. It's not, mafias. They have a problem with mafias. So they have so many immigrants. They have a lot of like Ukrainian gangs and Romanian gangs. Those are kind of the big ones. Those are the ones that cause a lot of trouble. So they, definitely known for violence. They've broken into the Parks' house a few times while they've been away. The Parks' have this little, they call it the people gate. And it's this just little gate. You reach your hand through the bar, slide this lever, and you can open it up. No problem. They never lock it. And they said one time they had people try and break in. And they came up to the people gate and, tried to shake it and get in, and they couldn't get it open. And they went and got a truck and attached a rope to the gate and tried to pull it and couldn't get it. So they left, and they could have just reached around and opened the door. But thank the Lord they didn't, they didn't figure that out. But yeah, they've had people actually break into their house a number of times, steal like all their valuable possessions and smash all the rest of their belongings and leave them everywhere. So it is a big problem. Anybody else, or can I get down? Thank you again for sending me and for praying for me. I am sure that some of you are praying for me, and I really appreciate it. And if you have any more questions, I would be happy to answer them when I'm not standing in front of all of you. So thank you again for everything.